Well, hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're making a barbecue serving tray. Well, full disclosure on this project, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. I have an idea for a serving tray, but I have so many joinery ideas and so many thoughts about how I want the final product to look that nothing's really coming together. So I thought, I'm tired of thinking about it. I'm going to get out there and just start building it, and I'll just adapt as I go. So this could be a good project, or it could be designer kindling when it comes time to use my wood stove again. Either way, guys, it's going to start off with some 1/2-inch thick cherry. So this project is going to start with 4 pieces of cherry. They are 1/2 inch thick each. I have ripped them to be 1.5 inches wide, and they're approximately 19 inches long. So the very first thing that we want to do with these pieces is I want to put a rabbet on the bottom edge of each piece. And that rabbet is going to be 1/2 inch tall or deep in here. And on our side profile, it's going to be 1/4 inch. So a rabbet that measures 1/4 inch by 1/2 inch in the bottom of each one of these pieces. So the next thing I want to do is on our top edge, this rabbet will be on the bottom. On both sides of our top edge, I want to put a 1/8 inch round over. And we're just going to do that over at the router table. Now guys, I've said this before, but please take note here of the use of a starter pin to get a piece like this started into the router bit to avoid kickback. If you haven't seen kickback on a router table, it can be just as violent and just as damaging as a table saw kickback. So please don't take it for granted. Get into the habit of using a starter pin on your router table. Well, I've installed a fine crosscut blade in the table saw, and our next step is to cut the miters that will make us a frame that has an interior dimension of 17.5 by 11.5. Guys, I can't stress it enough. Do not try to hold these pieces with your hands. You won't have the strength. Get a clamp on there and let the clamp do the work. You'll get a much better result, a much better miter, and a much better fit. Now guys, whenever you're cutting miters on a table saw or cross-cutting, there is always the chance that the blade can grab your piece, hook the offcut, and fire it back at you. And for that reason, that is why we stand off to the side away from where the offcut will be released. And this is a great example right here. No harm, no foul. I was off to the side like I should have been. The piece sailed by me, and well, I need some new shorts, but other than that, I'm good to go. So at this point, we've done a dry fit and everything looks good. But what we need to do is I want to do a little bit of work on the 2 end pieces, the shorter pieces of our cherry. So we can put our longer pieces aside for the moment, and we can work on these. So the first thing we want to do is place a center line right in the middle of each one of these pieces. Now from each of these center lines, we're going to come out 2.5 inches and place a mark here. So 2.5 inches, and then we will square that off. Now this is going to yield right in the middle a 5-inch wide section. I'm going to show you what we're going to do with that. Just let me get this one marked first. So now 3/4 of an inch down from the top, remember that our bottom has the rabbet, so 3/4 of an inch down, right in between these lines, we are going to put a line right across here to mark that section off. This is the section that we're interested in. So we'll do that on both of our pieces. Now, using a 1-inch diameter circle template, we're going to round off the bottom corners here of our 5-inch by 3/4 inch section, and as well we're going to use the same 1-inch circle template and round off the top to soften the transition between this vertical line and the top of our frame. and we'll mark that out on both pieces. As well, guys, what we want to do is from our center mark here, we're going to measure out 1.5 inches from each side, place a mark. We're going to square that off and as well transfer it to the top of our pieces. You want to make sure that these lines, the distance between these two lines, double check it and ensure that it is 3 inches, because we are going to need to drill some holes there. So we're going to transfer that to our top surface, and right in the center of our 1/2 inch, we're just going to drill a pilot hole as deep as we can. I'm thinking maybe just a 1/8 inch diameter. And there we have our holes. I actually went with 3/32 of an inch for these pilot holes. You'll understand more about that a little later. So what we're going to do at this point is I want to take these over to the scroll saw. I'm going to cut along those lines there with those 1 inch diameter circles. Give it a sanding at the oscillating drum sander just to smooth out the transition and make sure that everything looks good. And then we're going to head back to the router table and put our roundover, our 1/8 inch roundover, on both sides of this new profile on both of our pieces. Once we get that done, we're going to come over here and we can do another dry fit. And at this point, if you're happy with the dry fit, give all your pieces a good sanding, especially on the interior surfaces. I think I'm going to leave the exterior for now. We'll do that after it's dry, but you're going to want to do the interior for certain. And glue this together. Clamp it up and let it sit overnight and let it completely dry. Well, now for this glue up, I have used Titebond 3 for both its waterproof characteristics and its extra drying time. That gives me some more time to work. And one of the most important things here in gluing up a project like this, or a picture frame, or anything with the 45s in it, is you want to make sure that all 4 corners are perfectly square. And in this case, I'm good. There's no adjustment needed. But now is the time to find those problems. So before you walk away from this and leave it alone for the night, make sure that those 4 corners are square. As well, what we want to do at this point is turn your project over, and we're very carefully going to take a measurement from inside to inside of this rabbet that we cut in the project. And write that measurement down because we're going to need it for our next step. Well, now what we need for the next step is some more cherry. In this case, again, 1/2 inch thick. They're about 19 inches long and they are 2 inches wide. Guys, these are going to form the bottom slats of our serving tray. So I don't want a solid bottom on this serving tray. Things get spilled in these things, so I want a way for any liquids to fall out through the bottom. So that measurement that we took from end to end on the inside of those rabbets, for me ended up to be 17 and 15/16 of an inch. So what I'm going to do on each one of these pieces, I'm going to take it over to the table saw, we're going to square off the one side, and then we're going to cut them to length. And we can now give each one of these slats a good sanding and take them over to our frame of our tray. Well, I know that our frame is not completely dried up, but we can start on the assembly or the installation of these slats. So what we're going to do is we're just going to place a small little bead of glue around the perimeter here, just where this slat is going to be. We're going to put this slat right in the corner. We're going to press it into place and then put a couple clamps on it. From there, we're going to do the same thing in this corner, taking another slat, lining it up, getting some glue in there, and letting it set, clamping it up as we go. For the center ones, we're going to mark a center line here on both our frame for our tray and on our slat. That way we can just line up the center marks and we will know exactly where it's supposed to go and that it's going to be lined up. We'll do the same thing with here. The distance between these two slats will mark the center point on our slat, and again, place it in there, little bead of glue, and glue it in place. And then, of course, the same procedure for this one. Guys, once you get those all in place, there's not much you can do at this point. Sit back, relax, listen to some music, clean your shop, but we have to wait for this to dry until we can move on to the next step. Well, with everything dried up, we now want to reinforce these slats. That little glue joint, as strong as it is, I really want it to be a little stronger because we don't know what exactly we're going to load into this. So on each end, 1/4 of an inch down from the bottom, we're going to draw a line right across. And at the center mark of each one of our slats on that 1/4 inch line, we're going to drill a 1/8 diameter hole that is about an inch deep. And in each one of these holes, we're going to place a little bit of wood glue, and we have a piece of 1/8 diameter maple dowel. And we're just going to drive it into the hole, just like that. And that will pin the shelves and hold them in place. So that way, if you put excess weight on this, the glue joint is not going to break away. So these are going to stick out, but we're going to let them dry, and then we'll flush cut them and sand them off. Well, those maple pins are all sanded flush. They look good. This whole thing really needs a good sanding at this point. But before we do that, I'm going to take it over to the router table, and along the bottom edge, we're going to place that same 1/8 round over that we've done all the way around the top edge, just to give it some symmetry. Once we get that done, give the entire thing a really good sanding, and then there's just a couple more things we need to do to this. Well, after giving this a good sanding all over, I have done some drilling here at our pilot holes that we drilled earlier. And essentially, by using the same drill press setup with the fence that I used to drill the pilot holes, I drilled a 3/8 counterbore here and then enlarged our pilot holes to 3/16 of an inch. And that is going to house the hardware for some handles. Because what I really want for this project is a contrast between metal and wood. And of course, once we get the finish on the cherry, it's really going to bring out that rusty cherry color, and it'll just really complement these aluminum satin finish hardware that I have here, these handles. Now, if you guys think these handles look a little familiar, that's because they should. These are the exact same handles that I used on my router table, and I had a few left over, so I decided I was going to repurpose them and use them for this project. So there we go. We'll get one of these on each side, and then all that's left to do, guys, is the finishing. And the finishing is going to be a really good coat of Danish oil. And then once I'm done that, and I've had the chance to let that dry for at least 6 to 7 days, I'm going to hit this thing with some water-based varnish with the HVLP gun. Give it 4 really nice coats. And then when I get that finished up, I'm going to show you guys what we ended up with. Well, truth be told, it's actually been a couple weeks since I worked on this. I had other things that got in the way. But guys, the finish on this with that HVLP turned out absolutely beautiful. Truth be told as well, I wasn't happy with the finish after 4 coats. At some point, there was a couple of flaws. There was one here, and one over here. I think what happened is I accidentally dripped a little bit of water onto the finish before spraying. So, not to be discouraged, once the finish was dry, I actually wet sanded it to get rid of those finishes and then gave it one more top coat. And guys, the results of this are absolutely beautiful. I love the tray. I love the way it looks. I like the entire design of it. It really works well. Now, the size of this tray was not by accident. We have, when we eat outside, clear placemats that we place onto our table. So this tray was designed to hold those clear placemats. So this does a couple things. Number one, it gives us a way to carry our placemats out when the family's eating outside. But as well, it protects the tray if we're bringing out things like a pitcher of cold water or condiments. That way that cold and sweat doesn't get down to the tray and damage our solid wood surface of the cherry. So there you go, guys. Just a wonderful project, a wonderful outcome. I'm really happy with this one. And there you have it, a barbecue serving tray. Guys, this project turned out much better than I ever hoped it would. I had an idea in my head as to what I wanted, but no idea as to how to accomplish that, and no idea of the final design. So I just kind of went with it as I built the project, and it really worked out well. Sometimes you just gotta get in there and do it and not worry so much about the technical aspect. Now, we had a little bit of problem solving at one point with the bolts, the hardware for our handles. And it's just a matter of, it was hard to drill them on the back. Thank goodness for the fence and being able to counterbore and all of that, but it worked out well in the end. So don't be afraid to get in there and think about ways to solve your problems that you're having along the way, whether it be with hardware or whether it be with joinery. Case in point with those 1/8 dowels that I put into the ends of each one of the slats. It's not necessary, but it made me feel better and kind of gave a little bit of a design accent with those little dots there on the side. But it will strengthen that tray and prevent any of those slats from releasing. Now guys, the hardware. I will put the link to the hardware that I use down below if you're interested. I think each handle is like $3 or something like that. I had these left over from making my router table. I use these in my shop for various projects, so I just happened to have a couple and I wanted to use them up, and this was a perfect way to do it. But if you're interested in these brushed aluminum simple wire handles, then of course I'll post the link down below and you can check them out. Either way, guys, this is a fun project. It's a functional project. It just looks great. And you know what? That cherry, when you get the finish on that, that satin varnish on there, brings out the color of the cherry. And oh my gosh, this one's a gorgeous project. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in this week. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. You click the bell and then you're not going to miss the notifications of future episodes of the show. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed the project. I hope you've learned something along the way here today. I hope you've been able to take something positive away from the show. I hope you're going to try this one for yourself. And more importantly, I hope you're going to join me again next week when I bring you yet another woodworking video.